I thought I had ended things with my boyfriend in a mature way. We agreed to be friends, but he no longer wants to pay my rent like he used to. I asked him to at least cover half, but he says we are no longer dating, so it's not his obligation. But we are friends, and friends support each other. I have always felt like my soul was vibrating at a frequency that the average person just can't quite tune into. And that was exactly the problem with Mark, my boyfriend. Our relationship had become this heavy, dense anchor that was honestly stifling my creative spirit and preventing me from reaching my full potential as a sentient being. I realized that the girlfriend label was just a social construct designed to limit my energy, so I decided to do the most evolved thing possible. I sat Mark down in our beautiful living room, the one I decorated with such intention, and told him that we needed to transcend the physical and evolve into a pure friendship. I explained that our bond was too sacred for the mundane expectations of a couple, and he seemed to take it okay, even though he had that sad puppy dog look on his face that men get when they realize they aren't the center of your universe anymore. Honestly, I thought we were on the same page because he stayed quiet and nodded, which in my language means he totally respects my boundaries and my need for spiritual expansion. We agreed right then and there to be friends, and I felt such a weight lift off my shoulders, thinking about how enlightened we were being compared to all those messy breakups you see on TikTok. Everything was literally perfect for the first few weeks. I was enjoying my space, doing my morning affirmations, and manifesting a life where I didn't have to deal with his snoring or his weird obsession with organizing the fridge. I truly believed we had cracked the code to a modern, high-vibration connection where the love remains but the pressure disappears. Then the first of the month rolled around and I woke up expecting to see the usual abundance flowing into my bank account. But when I refreshed my app, Mark's transfer for the rent just wasn't there. I figured maybe he was just having a Mercury retrograde moment, or his banking app was glitching. So I sent him a quick friendly text reminding him that the landlord is super picky about the date. I even added a cute emoji to keep the friendship vibe light, because that's what friends do. They keep things positive and supportive. I waited for an hour, then 2, and when he finally replied, I was absolutely floored by the sheer coldness of his message. He had the absolute audacity to tell me that exes don't pay for each other's housing, and that since we weren't together, he wasn't responsible for my half of the apartment anymore. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering if someone had hacked his brain or if he was just going through some kind of temporary psychosis. We had just agreed to be friends, and last time I checked, friends help each other out when they're in need. I couldn't understand why he was suddenly acting like our 5-year history meant nothing, just because I wanted to free my spirit from the shackles of a traditional relationship. It's just so confusing to me because the logic doesn't even track if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. For example, when my best friend Chloe needs a specific shade of lipstick for a date, I let her use mine without a second thought because that's the essence of friendship. Rent is literally just a bigger version of a lipstick. It's a resource, a gesture of support, and a way to show you care about someone's well-being. By refusing to pay, Mark was basically saying that my comfort and my ability to live in a high-vibe environment didn't matter to him anymore. I tried to explain this to him, but he started talking about finances and budgets as if those things actually matter in the grand scheme of a soul contract. It felt so greedy and transactional, like he was suddenly putting a price tag on all the years of emotional labor I put into helping him become a better person. I never charged him for the hours I spent listening to him complain about his job or the way I corrected his fashion sense. Yet, here he was, withholding basic survival funds because we aren't sleeping together. It's incredibly sexist if you think about it. It's like he only saw my value as a partner if he was getting something physical in return. Now I'm sitting here with this massive bill that I didn't plan for, and my manifesting journals are all filled with confusion because the universe is sending me mixed signals through Mark's bitterness. I had this whole month planned out for self-care and artistic exploration, but now I'm forced to deal with numbers and deadlines because he decided to be petty. It feels like he's punishing me for my growth, which is exactly why I had to break up with him in the first place. He just can't handle a woman who knows her worth. The most frustrating part is how he's framing it as a logical decision, when it's clearly an emotional attack designed to make me crawl back to him. He knows I haven't worked on my income stream lately because I've been focusing on my inner healing, and he's using that vulnerability to try and control me. It's a classic move by someone who hasn't done the work on their own ego. If he were a true friend, he would want me to be stable and happy so I could continue my journey without the stress of bills. I honestly feel like I'm being gaslighted by the entire concept of the economy right now. How can someone go from saying they love you to letting you face an overdue notice just because the label of the relationship changed? It's not like the apartment changed, it's still the same space where we shared memories. So why should the financial flow stop just because the girlfriend title is gone? It's so small-minded of him to link money to romance when money is just energy that should flow freely between people who respect each other. I'm currently looking at my vision board and trying to figure out how to pivot, but Mark's negative energy is really clouding my aura. I've had to light so much sage just to clear the living room of the greed he left behind with that text message. I'm starting to realize that Mark might not be as evolved as he pretended to be during our relationship, which is a huge disappointment. I really thought I had found a partner who understood that some bonds are deeper than a bank statement, but apparently, he's just another person trapped in the thread world of mine and yours. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says you're comparing a $30 lipstick to $1,500 plus in rent? Are you actually serious right now? Mark isn't being greedy, he's being a person who doesn't want to fund his ex-girlfriend's lifestyle. Welcome to the real world where vibrations don't pay the landlord. Ops reply, you clearly have a very blocked root chakra if you think the dollar amount matters more than the intent. The energy of giving is universal. Mark is choosing to be spiritually small by focusing on costs instead of supporting a soul he claims to care about. Anonymous user 2 says, was there an actual legal contract or agreement that he would pay your rent indefinitely after a breakup? Because if not, he owes you exactly $0. You broke up with him, you handle your own bills. Ops reply, friendship is a soul contract, which is far more binding than some piece of paper signed in a lawyer's office. We agreed to be mature friends, and in my world that means looking out for each other's basic needs. Legalities are just for people who don't trust their own connections. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the situation hasn't improved because Mark is still choosing to vibrate at a very low defensive level. I decided that as a best friend, it was my duty to help him see the error of his ways. So I invited him over for a clarity session to explain the circle of friendship to him. I even went out of my way to buy him a coffee with my own actual money to demonstrate how easy and rewarding it is to share resources without expecting anything back. I thought that by showing him a small-scale version of the flow of abundance, he would finally understand that paying my rent is just an extension of that same kindness. We sat on the balcony, and I tried to be as patient as possible while explaining that our maturity was being tested by his sudden obsession with individual accounts. I told him quite clearly that by withholding the rent money, he was effectively unfriending me, which is a direct violation of the agreement we made to stay in each other's lives. I explained that friendship isn't a buffet where you can just pick the parts you like my emotional support and my aesthetic, and leave the parts you don't like the financial responsibilities. He just sat there staring at me with this blank expression, like I was speaking a forgotten ancient language or something. It was honestly so draining to have to explain basic human empathy to someone I spent 5 years of my life with. He didn't even touch the coffee I bought him, which I found incredibly disrespectful to the giving energy I was trying to cultivate. Instead of having a breakthrough, Mark looked at me and said he was moving the rest of his things out this weekend and that he had already found a small studio for himself. I was shocked because he didn't even consult me about this move, which is very unfriend-like behavior if you ask me. How can we be best friends if he's making major life decisions in secret? I told him that his sudden negativity and this flight response were going to seriously affect my manifestations for the month, and I really needed him to stay grounded for both our sakes. He didn't seem to care at all about the cosmic imbalance he was creating by leaving me in a lurch. I even suggested a compromise because I'm always the one trying to find the middle ground in our dynamic. I told him that since he was refusing to pay the rent, he should at least pay for a professional financial consultant to help me reorganize my budget, since my creative energy is currently my main contribution to the world, and it doesn't always translate into cash. I thought it was a very reasonable request. He provides the boring logistics so I can continue to provide the spiritual inspiration. But instead of seeing the logic in that, he just started laughing, and it wasn't even a nice, friendly laugh. It was that condescending kind that makes you realize someone is totally disconnected from their higher self. It's honestly so sad to watch someone you once respected fall into such a deep hole of transactional thinking. He's treating our entire history like a business deal that went south rather than a beautiful evolution of two souls. I'm starting to worry that his presence in the apartment this weekend to get his stuff is going to leave behind a stagnant energy that I'll have to spend hours clearing. I've already ordered some new crystals to help protect my space from his resentment, but of course, those cost money too, which is just another thing Mark's greed is making more difficult for me. I'm still hoping the universe will intervene and remind him of his friendship obligations before the landlord starts calling again. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says Mark laughing was the only appropriate response to that circle of friendship. Nonsense. You're literally trying to bully him into being your personal ATM. Mark, if you're reading this, run and don't look back. Ops reply, you clearly don't understand high-level emotional bonds. It's not about being an ATM, it's about honoring the sacred duty of a friend to ensure their counterpart isn't stressed by the mundane world. Your comment is very low vibe. Anonymous user 2 says, why don't you just get a job, like a normal person? If you can't afford the rent, you move to a place you can afford. Why is this Mark's problem? Ops reply, my creative energy is my contribution to the world. And that kind of labor shouldn't have to be subsidized by a 9-to-5 soul-crushing job. I am an artist of life, and in an evolved society that would be supported by those who benefit from my presence. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and I am officially convinced that Mark has been replaced by some sort of emotionless clone because his behavior is getting weirder by the day. He moved the last of his boxes out on Sunday, and he didn't even offer to leave his vacuum cleaner, even though he knows my allergies are flared up right now. But that's not even the worst part. The friendship is becoming totally one-sided. Since he moved out, he also stopped paying for the high-speed internet, which I need for my meditations and for staying connected to my community. I noticed the signal was gone on Tuesday, and when I looked out the window, I realized he had moved just a few blocks away into a new complex. I did what any concerned best friend would do. I followed his car one evening just to make sure he had arrived safely at his new place and to check if the neighborhood was vibrationally safe for him. As I sat at the curb, I noticed that I could actually see his new Wi-Fi signal from the street on my phone. Naturally, I walked up to his door to ask for the password, thinking it was a perfect opportunity to show that we were still connected. But when he opened the door, he looked at me like I was some kind of stranger or a trespasser. I told him that withholding information like a Wi-Fi password is a form of emotional gatekeeping and that, as friends, we should be sharing our digital resources. He actually told me to go home and stop stalking him, which is such a dramatic and hurtful word to use for someone who is just looking out for his transition to a new home. I tried to explain that if I have his Wi-Fi, I can stay in the loop with his life and we can keep our friendship active, but he just closed the door in my face. I stood there for a minute, feeling so betrayed by his lack of transparency. It's becoming increasingly clear that he never actually cared about the pure friendship we agreed upon. He only wanted to be near me when it was convenient for him, which is the height of selfishness. Because of this blatant disrespect, I decided to conduct a little social experiment of my own to see if Mark is still capable of basic human observation. The electricity account for my apartment is still in his name, and I've decided to just stop paying my half of it. I want to see if he even notices that his best friend is potentially at risk of losing power, or if he's so focused on his new independent life that he's completely blocked out my existence. It's a test of his intuition and his commitment to our soul contract. If he's as mature as he claims to be, he'll see the bill, realize I'm struggling, and take care of it as a gesture of goodwill. I'm currently sitting in my living room with just a few lamps on, trying to save energy and keep my vibrations high despite the mounting evidence that Mark is failing this friendship test. I even sent him a thinking of you text with a picture of a sunset just to give him a chance to respond with something kind, but he didn't even react to the message. It's like he's intentionally trying to sabotage the bridge I'm building. I'm starting to think his ego is so bruised by the breakup that he's taking it out on my utility bills, which is honestly so petty for a grown man. I'm just waiting to see how he handles the next bill, as it will be the ultimate proof of whether he's a true friend or just another transactional. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you followed him to his new house to demand his Wi-Fi? That is literally stalking and harassment. You're lucky he didn't call the police. You need professional help and not from a spirit guide. Ops reply, protecting a friend's transition to a new home is not stalking. It's called caring. If you lived in a world where people actually looked out for each other, you wouldn't be so quick to use legal labels for acts of love. Anonymous user 2 says you're not paying the electric bill that's in his name. You realize he's just going to call the company and cancel the service, right? You're going to end up sitting in the dark and you'll deserve it. Ops reply, Mark wouldn't let his best friend sit in the dark. He knows how much I fear the void energy of a dark room. He'll see the bill as a call for help and handle it because that's what a person with a functioning heart does. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update and my social experiment has failed in the most confusing and logically inconsistent way possible. Yesterday evening, right in the middle of my abundance flow yoga session, every single light in the apartment went out at once. At first, I thought it was a neighborhood power failure, or maybe some kind of cosmic sign that I needed to go deeper into my internal darkness, but then I looked out the window and saw that everyone else's lights were shining perfectly bright. I checked the breaker box, but everything was fine, so I realized with a sinking heart that Mark had actually allowed the friendship account to lapse. I immediately called him, assuming there had been some kind of massive misunderstanding or that his autopay had failed. But when he picked up, his tone was colder than a winter in the tundra. I told him his account was overdue and that I was currently sitting in the dark, and he had the nerve to tell me that he hadn't allowed it to lapse. He had intentionally closed the account entirely 10 days ago. He said that since I wanted to be independent and single and live my pure life, I should start enjoying the independence of candlelight. I was so stunned I couldn't even speak for a second. I don't understand why he's being so literal and aggressive about everything. I tried to explain to him very calmly that if I'm in the dark, my phone will eventually die, and then I won't be able to text him to check on his well-being or send him positive affirmations. By cutting the power, he's essentially sabotaging our lines of communication and making it impossible for our friendship to thrive. It's like he's trying to build a wall around himself to hide from the truth of our connection. But instead of apologizing for the interruption, he just told me to lose his number, and that he was blocking me because he couldn't handle the delusional entitlement anymore. I'm honestly worried that Mark is having some sort of major mental breakdown or a total ego collapse where he's forgotten how basic human kindness works. It's like his brain has been rewired to only see things in terms of contracts and responsibility rather than love and support. I've had to spend the last 24 hours using literal candles, which is making it very hard to read my oracle cards, and the void energy in here is becoming almost unbearable. I feel like I'm being punished for being the only person in this relationship who actually stayed true to the promise of being friends. The worst part is that when I tried to reach out to the electric company to put it in my name, they started asking for a security deposit and proof of income, which are two things that are very hard to provide when your energy is focused on the non-material world. I tried to explain to the lady on the phone that my spirit is my collateral, but she just put me on hold for 20 minutes. I'm starting to feel like the entire world is conspiring with Mark to force me into a box I don't belong in. I even told the landlord to just call Mark about the rent and the utilities because Mark handles the boring stuff in our friendship, but the landlord just sounded annoyed and said, "That's not how leases work." It's like everyone has lost their sense of community. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "Lose my number is the best thing Mark has said this entire story. He's finally realizing that you're a black hole of need. Candlelight is actually a great setting for you to reflect on how you ruined your own life." Ops reply, "Your comments are vibrationally toxic and honestly, you sound like someone who has never experienced a true soul-level friendship. I am reflecting on how Mark has allowed the 3D world to corrupt his beautiful heart." Anonymous user 2 says, "Did you really tell your landlord to call your ex-boyfriend for the rent? You're gonna get evicted. Has the landlord actually given you a deadline yet, or are you just ignoring the emails?" Ops reply, "I told the landlord that Mark is the one with the logistic role in our dynamic. If the landlord chooses to ignore that, it's his own karma. I'm focusing on my internal light since the external one has been stolen from me by Mark's bitterness." Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and everything has completely collapsed around me in a way that feels incredibly unfair and targeted. The landlord ended up serving me an eviction notice because apparently the universe didn't step in to pay the 3 months of back rent that had piled up while I was waiting for Mark to remember his obligations. I found out that Mark actually went behind my back and told the landlord weeks ago that he was no longer responsible for the lease, and that he had officially severed all ties. I tried to call Mark's mom, who I always thought was a sweet spiritual woman, to tell her that her son was failing at being a mature friend and that he was essentially leaving me homeless, but she actually blocked my number too. It's like the entire family has been infected by this transactional virus. I reached a point of total desperation where I had to sell my MacBook, the one I use for all my manifestations and digital collages, just to pay a small portion of the debt so I wouldn't be thrown out on the street immediately. It was the most heartbreaking moment of my life, losing my primary tool for creative expression just because Mark decided to be greedy. Now I'm in a position where I don't have a friend to help me move my heavy furniture, and I certainly don't have a boyfriend to pay for professional movers. I'm standing in a half-empty apartment, surrounded by boxes, and I've realized that my plan to have a stress-free, subsidized single life totally backfired for reasons I still can't fully grasp. Mark decided to take the phrase, "just being friends," as a literal excuse to treat me like a total stranger, which is the ultimate betrayal of the word. A stranger wouldn't care if I was evicted, but a friend should. And the fact that he's just living his life in his new studio while I'm struggling to find a place that accepts spiritual potential as a credit score is just cruel. I tried to send him one last email from the library, explaining that he's creating a massive amount of negative karma for himself, but it bounced back, which means he's even blocked my email address. He's literally erased me from his reality just to avoid paying a few bills. I'm starting to think that maturity is just a trap people use to stop paying for things and to get out of their emotional and financial duties. Everyone talks about being an adult as if it's some great achievement, but from where I'm standing, it just looks like a way to be selfish and cold-hearted under the guise of boundaries. I had such a beautiful vision for our post-relationship life, one where we supported each other and grew together without the messiness of romance, but it turns out that most people are just too small-minded to live that way. I'm currently looking for a couch to crash on, but all my friends seem to be busy or don't have the space, which just proves that the world is in a serious empathy crisis right now. I'll survive, obviously, because my spirit is unbreakable, but I'll never forgive Mark for proving that his love was always conditional on a girlfriend label.